In the previous video, we rendered a list of menu items dynamically. So if we added another item to our list, say pizza, we would see that this is dynamically added anytime we hit refresh over here. We also noticed that there was a warning that was popping up in our console, letting us know that every child in a list had to have a unique key property. So the reason that this appears is that it's possible that things might get out of sync when rendering occurs, particularly if something is added to the front of that list or somewhere in the middle. Think of a key as being like an ID that keeps everything in sync. And it's JavaScript, right? So, of course, there are a couple of ways of handling this. First, we could just add an index. So, here, when we're iterating over our dishes array, we could add I as an iterator, and then we can add a key of I to each one of our dishes, and that will clear the warning. The React docs do recommend against this though, because there still can be problems with rendering, which is kind of not the point of keys in the first place. So, something we could do is perform a little data transformation, which we'll do here on line 53. So, we're going to go ahead and create an array of objects. So, we'll call this dish objects. And we'll set that equal to dishes.map. For each item in our dishes array, we want to create an object. And the reason for that is because each one of these should have an ID. So we'll say ID is I, and then the title is dish. So whatever the value of this dish is. Now, something to point out here is that whenever we are returning an object from an arrow function, we need to point that arrow function at a set of parentheses instead of just pointing it directly at these curly braces. So let's give it a save. This should create these objects. We're going to see though that nothing much changes because we need to add dish objects as our value for dishes. As soon as I do that, I have exploded my app, which is okay. And that's because it's finding an object with a couple of keys instead of flat values. So let's scroll up a little bit further. We're still using dishes, but now what we want to do is this. We'll say dish.title. We'll remove this key here, and then we'll say dish.id. So you might be thinking, isn't this the same because we're just using an index again? Not really, because the data is actually stable. We've created it using this function instead of being created while the list items are being rendered. Another thing to think about is that your data already might look like this. So you could just use an ID or another unique field if you are already dealing with an array of objects. Keys help keep your data in sync as your application state changes over time. So, this is why it's really important to add them anytime you're trying to iterate over something and return a dynamic value.